something to tell.
Oh, well, you can go ahead. The microphone probably works. Right?
Yeah, when you talk about family histories, a few years ago, the son of a friend of mine came and just kind of interviewed me because he was going around to different people who were friends of his parents. They were going to be celebrating their, I think it was their 45th or 50th wedding anniversary. It was Denny Franson, the one that owns the, you know, it was his son. And so I just sat here and told him, because his wife, I babysat her when she was about 6 months old, and she's one of my dear friends now.
Yeah.
And so good to me. And then her girls babysat my kids when they were little. My kids babysat her children.
Yeah.
And my granddaughter, Shauna, babysat her grandchildren.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? And now she and I end up with that we're just such good friends. I can't believe this month is almost gone.
I can't believe the summer's almost gone.
Well, I know.
We start school in like 2 weeks.
Isn't it? I know. So that Shauna's girls do too. I think they start the 16th. They say.
Yeah.
No, it's hard to believe it. I don't know where time goes. It goes so fast. And I've truly never had a long, lonely day. No, I mean, and I can be here some days and never speak to a soul. Though, by the time I go to bed at night, I'll think, my gosh, I didn't even have a phone call today.
Yeah.
But I always find something to entertain myself. Start asking me questions now.
Okay, you want to hear his first one? Because this is a killer.
Is it really?
Oh yeah. What do you think is the most important overall story to tell future generations about your family's journey, challenges, endurance, and triumphs during the last century? Is there anything in particular that most people don't know or that should be preserved, explained, or celebrated?
I can't imagine what it would be. Any one thing. Just had an ordinary life.
I think these are questions that...
Where did he find them?
Yeah, and the personal historian's website. But I think it's designed for the people who want to...
Yes, to repeat, to have their history repeated.
Yeah, to think about for a little while before they...
Oh, I see.
You know, give them time to think about. So that one's a hard one to think of.
Yeah, because we were just ordinary people with an ordinary family.
Oh, yeah.
In an ordinary little small town.
We'd want to know if there were any open houses when we came into town so we could go tour.
Well, I don't think there is right now because of course I shouldn't say because I don't know what's going on up in that end of town.
Mm-hmm.
It was all, you know, they were all contracted houses. Or built by contractors.
We drove by the auction coming in too. There were a lot of people up there.
Were they really?
Yeah, what does he get? Where does he get his stuff?
Well, for instance, like if I was going to sell my house
Yeah.
and wanted to have a sale, he'll take everything in it, and he might have everything from 3, 4, 5 places like that when he's out there. Hauls it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is he just a local guy? Does he just get stuff from local?
He lives down in that area around Center City, I think, or Lindstrom.
Mm.
He's the one that did Aunt Noah's auction and Uncle Glenn's one after they had died.
Yeah.
And I know Colleen knows him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he's got a big business. They've done well.
Does he have other auctions or just that one a week up here? Or?
Oh, I think he has them all the time. I don't know.
All over the place?
Yeah. This is a little different because usually the auctions are at, for instance, if I was selling, the auction would be here.
Yeah, that's what I was...
Yeah, and I know he has those private ones, yeah.
Like estate sales.
But I don't pay attention to him. Like Bob next door watches that because he goes to him looking for antiques.
Dishes.
Dishes, usually, yeah. Well, it isn't necessarily dishes. For instance, now he has a collection of buttons, like the Winter Carnival buttons and the high school, not graduation, but homecomings and things. Any event. He has a big collection of them.
From our city? Like the
Oh, from
City
all over.
Homecoming?
No, he collects them from all over.
Oh.
You know, he might go to an auction in Timbuktu and they might have some. It's just a hobby. But
Yeah. What do you collect?
Cardinals, snow babies. Did I ever tell you about my one set of snow babies over there?
I don't know.
Go over it and I'll tell you which one.
Which one?
The bunnies are doing the maypole.
Yeah.
And the reason I bought that, I was going up to a gift shop in Pine City. I used to almost always buy a fancy Easter egg, and I was going up to see what there was. But on the way up, I don't know, just in my mind, I was remembering when I was in first grade, we had a pageant on a lawn here. It was a big house and a big lawn in town, and we had a school pageant there, outdoor pageant. And I was in second grade, and we danced the maypole. I mean, a great big pole with the ribbons were like 2-3 inches wide.
Yeah.
And you dance, you wove. The boys had green ribbons and we had pink ones, and you danced. There was music and you danced. You know, one went over and one went under so that the pole was woven.
Uh-huh.
It was called maypole.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about that when I don't know why, when I was going up to look for an egg, I walked in the gift shop and they had that right there in front, that maple. Well, I didn't buy an egg. I ended up buying that.
That starts your snow babies collection?
No, I had some before. There's a couple of skaters and hockey players
Oh.
that, like the twins have given me.
Mm-hmm.
And
This one's got a bluebird on top, though, not a cardinal. We could paint it for you.
maybe that's what we should do. But most all of those are gifts. Carol always says that's her favorite collection that I have.
It's the snow babies.
Uh-huh. Well, and they are kind of precious to me because, like I say, they were practically every one of them. Well, I don't know that yeah, I did too. I bought those 2 little tumblers, and I think a wing was broken on it or something, and I bought them for nothing.
They're cute. I like the one that's shoveling the stars, too.
That one I know, I think Colleen gave me.
Yeah.
But Mark has given me some too. And Bev, my friend I know, gave me 1 or 2 for birthdays or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I collect them and cardinals and my baby dolls in the bedroom.
Didn't you make those?
Hmm?
Didn't you make those?
Oh
I
no,
used
I
to
mean
make
the real
the baby
dolls.
dolls.
No, I have collector's dolls on the bed in there.
I thought you made them.
I made those stuffed dolls that are sitting in the chair. No, those I don't care about anymore.
What, the baby dolls?
Oh, the baby dolls. Oh, yeah,
You
I
care
do.
about-
Those are collectors.
Mm.
In fact, the very first one I bought down on Marco Island. We had been there and walked in this shop, and oh, it was just full of dolls. I always loved dolls from the time I was a real little kid. And they had all these beautiful dolls, and I walked over and there was kind of a little cradle, and it had about 3 baby dolls in it. And I looked at this one that was sleeping, and oh my gosh, it just reminded me of any of the babies when they were little. And I really wanted to buy it. But my sister Irene was with me, and she was being kind of a turd that whole trip. I mean, she was belittling me always.
Yeah.
And she was never like that before. She was the sweetest thing in the world, but she was terrible. Anyway, I could just hear her telling, oh, Maddie paid $200 for that doll, you know. And I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And there was no way I could sneak around to order it without her. But you know, I had that on my mind for 2 years, and I made more phone calls to different doll catalogs, like out in California, and I was trying to find that doll.
Oh.
Never did. Okay, a couple years later, I was down to Marco Island with, I can't remember if it was somebody else, And I said, there's one place I want to go, and I said, I don't know the address, but I know exactly how to get into that shop. Went down there looking for my baby. It wasn't there.
No.
And the gal behind the counter heard me, I don't know who I was with, saying it, you know.
Yeah.
And she asked me about what doll. She said, oh, I know what doll that was. And she pulled out a picture of it. And, yep, that was the one. She said, well, I can order that for you. And she did.
Oh.
And the strangest thing is, I have a friend here who, well, she's many, many years younger than me, but we were visiting one day and she's telling me about collecting dolls. And she's telling me about this baby doll. How she wanted this baby doll so bad. I mean, they have lots of money, but her husband thought it was ridiculous spending that kind of money for a doll. But she finally ended up, after a couple of years, she got her doll too. She lives just out in the country here.
It wasn't the same doll.
Same doll.
You're kidding.
Well, they're made by a doll. They all have names of the people who make the dolls.
Yeah.
Well, it's a big business.
What did the doll cost?
I think I paid $225.
Wow.
I have 4 of them that are, fairly expensive, that are collector's dolls.
And they're like
Shirley
Madam
Temple
Alexander
is one of
dolls?
them. She isn't really a baby.
No.
I was very disappointed in that one, though. I mean, she's a cute doll and all, but it really didn't exactly look like Shirley Temple as I remembered her when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But those other dolls are the ones that I made. Those are the ones that are sitting in the chair in the hall.
Oh,
Those
okay.
big stuffed. The first one of those I made, I donated for a bazaar or something at church, and they sold chances on it. They made over $300 on it.
Oh, good.
And then it was on display downtown in one of the stores, and then a lady called me and asked if I would make one for sale for her, and I said, no, I didn't feel like doing this. Well, I said that by the time I paid for everything and put in any time at all, which doesn't pay,
Yeah.
I said I'd have to ask $50-some for it. Well, she didn't care. And I said, no, if I made them, I wanted them myself. Well, I'd given them away. Like I gave Shauna's mother-in-law, who has no girls.
Yeah.
When we went down, the very first time I met her, I brought her one. And I made one for my sister. I think I made 7 or 8 of them.
Where's Aunt Bobby living now?
And Bobby is living in a semi-retirement place in South Minneapolis.
In South Minneapolis?
She was in a condo. She sold her home.
I know she sold her home.
Yeah, and she was in a condo, and I think she had gotten so she liked it there.
Mm-hmm.
And here this winter, I don't know what happened really, but she was in bed for 3 days. Nobody knew it. She was in bed for 3 days.
Yeah.
And one of the women who she played cards with, they came to pick her up. And she didn't respond. She was like on the 3rd floor. She didn't respond, and so I guess one of them went up to her apartment. And here she was, like I say, she'd been in bed for 3 days. She really didn't remember anything hardly. And they got her to the hospital.
Yeah.
And she doesn't ever own up to anything that was wrong with her. But we kind of think she had kind of a stroke. Well, then her son and daughter came. And she was in a rest home for, I don't know, a few weeks. But then her son and daughter came, and they cleared out her place and rented this other place that's supposed to be, semi, there is help there, and
Like
she can eat
step-down care?
Yeah, but now my sister says really the only thing that she has is a cord in the bathroom that she can call for help.
Mm-hmm.
She said that's really all it amounts to, except that she can get her meal. She has to pay for so many meals a month, whether she eats there or not. But she doesn't really like it. She could have just as well stayed in her other apartment.
Mm.
And gotten one of those life alert things or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh.
But I think her mind was a little bit, it was very confused then, but I think she's better now. She calls me every once in a while.
Yeah.
See, she really has nobody other than her friends from church.
Well, where's Celeste living?
You mean Leslie?
Leslie.
Oh, she and Megan, her daughter,
Yeah.
live in Texas, and they, of course, they quickly drove up, and they ended up taking her car back. No, Colleen really was the best help for her.
Yeah.
Kevin came, her son,
Mhm.
and he was a help. But as far as Leslie and Megan, in fact, this is kind of unusual for Colleen to even say it, but she said she was so disgusted with Leslie. She treated her mother so terribly. They were trying to go through and get rid of things in the house, you know, and they said, she had no mercy on her mother at all. And Colleen said she was walking down the hall with Aunt Bobby. I don't know, they were doing something, and Colleen said to Aunt Bobby, she said, I'm really ashamed of the way Leslie treats you. And Aunt Bobby says, yes, she realized it, but that's Leslie. And Megan did absolutely nothing. She's a grown girl out of high school.
Yeah.
Did absolutely nothing to help. Well, they live like pigs. They
In
do.
Texas?
Uh-huh.
Do they live by Darcy?
Huh?
Do they live by Darcy?
No, not
Oh.
by her, but they live so that they get...
They get to see each other?
In fact, Darcy had gotten so she wouldn't leave Dylan with them anymore at all.
That's sad.
Yeah. No, I guess you just have to check them off the list.
Is Bobby the oldest?
No, Aunt Ola was the oldest, and then Bobby.
I don't know why. She just seemed like she
Older?
was the go-getter.
She was the... Well, she got in a little trouble, I remember, in grade school. And she was always, what do I want to say, tougher or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
More boyish.
Yeah.
But Irene was really a fine woman. The years like when she worked, and she was really. I always felt like back then. If anything ever happened and I needed a place to go, I could go and live at her house because she always treated me that way. That's why when I said I was in Florida with her, I can remember so well, just like getting in the car, and I had a white jacket. And it got caught in the door when I slammed it. And I said, oh, just a minute. I got to open the door. It's on my jacket. She said, oh, shit, that old thing. My jacket. I mean, she was like that about everything. It was the cards that I played and that I was used to playing were just trash compared to bridge. And she had two relatives down there that were in the same complex we were in. And then there was a couple that came down from the cities that stopped there, and they played bridge, and I sat and painted. I had some paints with me, and I was doing some cards, and I thought, they weren't having a bit of fun. They're sitting there playing these cards, so serious, nobody hardly even talked. But that was the elite.
When did you start going to Florida?
Oh gosh. We were there, we went to Florida for probably 8 years or so.
Yeah.
But then we'd been to Florida before that. Just on trips. Well, in fact, once when we were there was, like we were talking about yesterday, the postal convention.
Yeah.
We were in Miami at that time. But we were there for, the last time we were there was 87.
Okay.
And we must have been there for probably 8 years before that. And not consecutive, though, because we were in Arizona a couple of times in between there.
Oh. Well, you went with Irene.
That was after Chet died.
And Jean and Fran.
No, they came down.
Oh, okay.
And Chet's brother came down from out east, too. No, Aunt Bobby and I did. It wasn't the next year after Chet died. I didn't go that winter, but the following year, she thought I needed to go.
Well, you went down once and he was really sick, right?
Oh, we were there.
Yeah. And he was in the hospital.
You bet.
Yeah.
100 miles away.
Oh.
He was up in Tampa
Yeah.
in the hospital, and we were down in Port Charlotte. It was about 95 miles from there. No, we should never have gone that winter because, see, he had gone to the doctor finally in, I think it was October,
Yeah.
when he started. It wasn't you I was talking to about the disease he had, was it?
Yeah, because I couldn't remember what it was.
Did you
You
ask
told
him?
me yesterday.
That it was macroglobulinemia. But he started, I would say it was in October.
Yeah.
And then we went right after Christmas, and the doctor in the city told him he shouldn't go. But you know, I think we'd paid down, I don't remember, it was $1,500 or $2,000 before we left to have a place to go down to. We'd paid it before we left the year before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was bound we were going. Well, I know we could have canceled. We probably would have lost something, but we could have canceled it.
Yeah.
No, sir, he was bound to go. So they made connections from the VA hospital here to the VA hospital in Tampa for him. And so that's where he doctored, down there. Well, then they finally sent him home. I didn't come home with him. He insisted on flying home alone. Well, first his brother Bob was going to go with him. Bob was visiting down there, and so were Jean and Fran, his sisters. But I don't know how come they did. In fact, they bought a ticket for somebody else to go. We bought 2 tickets. But anyway, he went, and then Uncle Don, that was Aunt Fran's husband, met him in Minneapolis. Took him to the house, to the veterans.
Oh.
And then Mark flew down, and because I had the car down there, he flew down and helped me close up the apartment and pack up, and we drove home.
Yeah.
That was funny. I can still remember we stopped one night, I think it was maybe in Atlanta, and we rented a motel room together. Here was mother and son sleeping together. No, we didn't sleep together, but
Yeah.
it was kind of funny, I thought.
If you want me to pause this anytime, just let me know.
Well, I got some better ones than that to tell you.
Better than that.
Better than that.
Yeah, changing the subject completely.
Go ahead.
Okay. When Father Ralph was here, my kids always teased me about him being my boyfriend. Well, he was a good friend of mine. He wasn't a real good priest.
No.
But he was a good friend. Just fun friend. So one Sunday, I think I was just recovering from having had my knees done, so I wasn't getting out a lot. It was just around noon. He called me and he said, "Say, Maddie," he said, "what you doing?" And I said, "Well, nothing. Have you eaten?" "No." He said, "How about riding over with us over to Brigham? There's the church over there is having a pork chop grill. And would you like to come along?" He says, "I've got Frank," and I can't remember the woman's name. They're just finishing counting the money. And as soon as they get through, then we'll come around and pick you up. Fine. So I walked away, and I wasn't gone very long from the telephone. It rang again, and it was Father. And he said, "Maddie," he said, "I told Frank and whatever her name is to go on ahead." He said, "I'll come over and pick you up, then you and I can visit on the way over." This was at Brigham. So we did. And as we went out of town here, we passed an empty farm place, and he said, "You know, I'm kind of interested in that property." Just this casual conversation, you know. But anyhow, to make a long story short, we came. Well, I did feel kind of funny walking in Brigham for this dinner because we had a lot of patients from Brigham, the people that I knew.
Yeah.
And walking in with the priest might be a little bit questionable.
Oh, he's the priest.
Yeah, I
He was
know.
wearing his stuff, right?
Oh, heavens, no.
No?
No. Well, anyhow, when we were coming back, he wanted to drive down in where we had our cabin to see what that was like, where we were. And then we come back up past this property. It's just about 2 miles out of town here, 2-3 miles. And he said, Maddy, would you care if I drove in here? He said, you know, I think the creek runs through here, and I'd kind of like to look at. I don't care. There's no buildings there anymore. Okay, so we drove back in there. It's not, maybe 3 blocks off that you can see bare ground, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Got stuck. And I can see the highway with the cars going by. You know? And he's the kind of person that gets upset real fast, you know. And he's just a gunning that car. And I just sat there and laughed. I thought, oh, here's old widow LesSard out with the Catholic priest on Sunday afternoon for a riot, and they get stuck. Well, luckily he got out of it. And I don't think a soul ever saw it. But I still think it was fun to tell that story.
Old widow LesSard?
Out with the Catholic priest on the Sunday afternoon drive.
Part.
Well, I've got more stories about him than that. When I got my car, he was over here. I don't know what he was here for. Usually he came at Christmas, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know.
You know. But I don't remember what the occasion was. Oh, I bet he was visiting me because that's when I had my wrist done. And anyway, a couple of days later, first of all, he found out I got this car. And before he left, he knew exactly how much I paid for it with his sly questioning and how I was going to pay for it if it wasn't going to be too much of a burden for me, which I got kind of a kick out of. A few days later, I was coming out of the drugstore downtown, and he was coming across the street, going to go into the drugstore. And hey, Maddy, he said, say, could I borrow your car tomorrow? He said, I have to go to the city. He says, you know, I've never driven a new car. Well, my car was 2 years old.
A new car?
He said, I've never driven a new car. I said, well, yes, but I said, I'll have to have it back because I have to go to the city myself. In the morning, I had a doctor's appointment. Well, that was okay. Was that a signal?
No.
And so he came over that morning. Oh, I don't know, it was probably 9:30 to look the car over, you know, to see. And he's sitting in it in the garage there, fiddling with everything, you know, to find out how it worked. So he decided he wasn't going to go until later in the afternoon, but he might as well take the car. So he took it over and parked it in the parking lot at church.
Yeah.
About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he calls me and he says, say, Maddy, he says, the battery's dead in your car. I can't start it. Here he left a radio on in it.
Listen to the music, huh?
And I had to have it the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good old Clarence came over and, I don't know, he gave it enough juice so that we could drive it over to his house, and then he hooked it up overnight. It was okay.
Father Ralph, what did he have to
Oh,
drive?
Father Ralph said, though, he said, well, when you have to get a new battery, he said, I'll pay for half of it.
Oh.
Oh, he was a character. Anyway, that was one of my boyfriends.
That was one of your boyfriends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was so many boyfriends, you know.
What was your childhood like?
Well, I lived through the Depression, I told you that, so we never had much, but we always had everything we needed. My folks, we lived on a farm outside of town here until I was 5 years old, and I remember living out in the country. We moved to town, and I don't know really what my dad did, except I know there were potato warehouses along the railroad tracks here, and I know he tended them because I remember walking with him many times down at night to fuel up the place, fire them up. And we lived in a great big house. I think have I ever told you about that? Yeah, I told you about that. Oh, well, it had a front stairway and a back stairway.
It's just on the other side of the...
No, it's that way. They've torn it down now.
Oh, okay.
But it was a big house. In fact, we lived in it twice. We lived in it when we moved to town, and then we moved a couple of different places, and then we eventually, my dad bought that place and we moved back there. And they always had a great big garden. And my mother canned everything.
Mm.
I can remember the year that she, well, we wouldn't have eaten otherwise.
Yeah.
I remember the year that she said, well, there now, I've got 1,000 quarts put away. Can you imagine?
1,000 quarts?
Yes. They had a huge garden, so we had all kinds of vegetables, and they canned everything.
Yeah.
And that summer, my dad was out of work. It was during the Depression. But he would go down during the week down to what's Bloomington now. My uncle had a farm, a rich farm. That was rich farmland down there. And he raised all kinds of fruits and vegetables, and they would take them every morning to the market.
Mm-hmm.
I think the market was in St. Paul that they went to. And at the end of the week, my dad would probably bring home maybe a bushel of pears, because everybody was selling out, you know, to get rid of it. Stuff. He'd get it for maybe 50 cents, which was a lot of money then.
Yeah.
But and my mother canned everything, and everything from our garden. And, you know, we raised our own potatoes, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we always had plenty of food. We didn't always have butter. I can remember that. And I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Pine City. He was a rural mail carrier, so he had a good job and good income. And they came to our place almost every Sunday afternoon, and my mother made supper for everybody. And I remember myself being a little embarrassed because we didn't have butter on the table. But other than that, like I say, we didn't suffer. Although I do remember my mother cutting up an old overcoat of my dad's and made liners for my shoes, because back then all the shoes had leather soles, and they'd wear holes in them like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was winter. And she put that heavy overcoat sole in my shoes. But we didn't suffer from it.
But that was the way it was during the Depression.
Huh?
That's the way it was during the
Yeah,
Depression.
that's right. And one day in the mail came a package, a surprise package, and in it were 3 pair of winter boots for my 2 sisters and me. And it was from 2 gals who originally were from our city, and they would come home weekends, but they worked in the city. And they their whole family were friends of my family, my folks.
Yeah.
And this one day, here came this package. They had bought these boots for us with a little note. I still remember that. I suppose it was the first time I heard it. That a little birdie had found these boots and sent them to us. So we all had winter boots.
Huh.
That was when times were really, really hard times.
Oh. Didn't we say the other day you're born in 1926?
21.
21. Oh, okay.
I was born in 21, and Leola was born in 1918, and Irene in 1919. And then I was born in 21.
Okay.
So from the 1st of February, my birthday,
Mm-hmm.
till Leola's birthday, the oldest one, hers was the 24th of February. So from the 1st to the 24th, our years were consecutive until her birthday came along. Now Aunt Bobby's birthday is this week.
Yeah.
So, okay, now what else do you want to know?
Why are you making a face at me? How'd you meet Grandpa?
Oh, we were so modern, much ahead of the times. He lived at our house.
Oh.
See, when we moved back into that big house and my dad bought it, well, my mother always had boarders and roomers,
Mm-hmm.
and it was usually working men that had no home. And we had a young fellow that was from Princeton that was working at the dairy or the Land O'Lakes. And one weekend when he went home to Princeton, he came back, brought Chet back, because they needed another man. He knew they needed another man at Land O'Lakes. So he and Chet roomed and boarded at our house. But this other fellow's name was Percy. Well, then Percy, I suppose in the fall, quit work because he was going back to school. He had just worked to raise money for a quarter tuition or something, and he went back to the U then.
Mm-hmm.
But Chet stayed on. And I think I was probably a junior in high school at that time.
Oh.
And I don't know, he always teased me and I teased him, but nothing romantic. Except, I remember when I was, that spring when I was a senior in high school, I had been going steady with a kid from Graham. And if Chet would come in the room when this kid was there, he just completely ignored me. It was just real, almost snotty. And let's see then I went to work in the hospital at Pine. I didn't work there only just a couple of months. But I can remember he came and got me a couple of times. I suppose it was weekends or whatever it was. And we were always just really good buddies. I can remember once he gave me the last quarter he had in his pocket because I wanted to go to the movie to see Alexander's Ragtime Band.
Oh.
And my mother, I always had my own money. I mean, I babysat always or worked somehow,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have any money, and I asked my mother for it. And Mother said, no, she couldn't give me a quarter. And so Chet gave me, it was the last quarter he had in his pocket.
Oh.
I can still remember that at the table, slapping that quarter down. But then when he went in service, we started writing back and forth constantly, every day.
Wow.
Every day, almost every day for 4 years. That's why I just hate writing anything. I do. I'm terrible. I'm such a procrastinator.
Because you wrote so much?
Well, you can imagine writing every day, and if we didn't get it mailed, it would just accumulate. Sometimes I'd get maybe 3 or 4 letters at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially when he was overseas.
Well, and what did you write about?
I always remember I was with him for 1 year in North Carolina after we were married, before he went overseas,
Uh-huh.
and they used to take what they called field trips in the Army,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know where they went, out in the wilderness somewhere in North Carolina, but by golly, he wrote me a letter while he was out there. It was probably for 3 days.
Oh.
No, we wrote back and forth. That's actually how I never really went with him. You know what I mean? Like going
Yeah.
steady or anything like that. It was just kind of, and you know, it's really strange. I hope you can understand this, but he was 7 years older than me. And I always, till the day he died, I always felt like, I think more of a father figure or a protector or something
Yeah.
than a romantic husband, lover.
Yeah.
That's how I met him.
Was he in Germany? Where was he overseas?
He was in Germany, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then when he was wounded, then he was sent to England.
Mm-hmm.
And he was there for a while, probably from November until probably March, because when he got back to Germany and with his unit, they were, what he said, mopping up. The war was practically over then.
Mm. And was he with the Army?
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, I lived with him a year in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then he went to officers training school in Oklahoma, and wives couldn't go along then. So
Yeah.
I came home. I was about 2 months pregnant, and I came home and stayed home while he was overseas and gone after that.
But that was pretty common, though.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, plenty of people enlisted, right?
Hmm?
There were a lot of people that were enlisted that
Oh, yeah.
had wives back at home, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't just take them with you like you do now.
No, I don't think there was any wives that were ever shipped over or ever went over. Well, you wouldn't have wanted to go to Germany, for sure.
Or anywhere.
Well, it was mostly Germany and some of those, like, I want to say some of those Slovakian countries, like
Yeah,
Albert,
then France.
where they were. No, I don't think there was too much in France. Well, yeah, sure there
Yeah, there
was.
was.
Yeah, that's where he was stationed.
Mm-hmm.
And he was wounded, and he was in 2 different hospitals in France before they shipped him to England.
Where was he wounded?
Kind of in the groin.
Shot?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
They never were able to remove. He had 2 different operations, and they never were able to remove all of the shrapnel. Shrapnel must even spread after it gets in you, little shreds, because I know some. Gosh, it was a long time afterward that I remember one time he picked out some shrapnel that had risen to the skin. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
it wasn't anything much. It was just a little teeny.
How did he lose his eye?
He had, let's see, he had cataract surgery.
Mm-hmm.
He was getting so, like I can remember we were on a trip, he wasn't driving, but we were on a trip, and I remember they were pointing out, we were out west, I think, in the mountains or something, and they were pointing out probably mountain goat or some darn thing, and he'd say, no, he just couldn't see it. So his vision had just gotten dim, like. Although he always drove our car. Chet was a real good driver.
Yeah.
He really was a very good driver. And when he had cataract surgery, first on one eye, and that was fine, and then he had it on the other eye, and he was recuperating about during the Christmas rush at the post office. That used to be a terrible, terrible time.
I can imagine.
You hardly wanted to talk to anybody that worked in there. Everybody was overworked, overwhelmed. And he had this pain in his eye and trouble with it, but he was too busy. He couldn't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as that was over, then he went to the doctor, and he'd had a detached retina. And they supposedly repaired it, but he had a lot of pain in it for always afterward.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so funny because we could go out someplace just like this. We could be together, and he'd be talking and having a great time. And he was funny.
Yeah.
He really was funny. He was the best jokester. I never hear good jokes anymore. But he could tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I used to think, gosh, how could that be? He'd be so comfortable and everything while we were all out having fun. But then by the time we'd get in the car to go home, then he'd start complaining about this aching in his eye. Well, it ended up finally they just removed his eye.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, I don't think they would have done that.
Mm-mm.
He'd have probably gone through what I've been going through.
Yeah, it's around later. It's surprising that you're willing to go through so many surgeries after that happened to him, too.
Well, the surgery doesn't bother
It
me.
was so long ago.
But you know, like you were thinking it was so terrible. Do you know that I had the most wonderful anesthetic? Well, when I had the first cataract, I only heard one thing. I must have awakened a little bit because I heard the man that was standing with him, assisting him, say, "There's a piece in there yet." And the doctor that's operating says, "Yeah, I'm going after it right now." Well, that's the cause of the whole thing.
Mm.
Because I had so much bleeding in that eye. That's why my eye was blackened that I couldn't see a thing. It was the blood. And they didn't want to operate for fear of the optic nerve damaging that. So they decided to just see if it would gradually dry and float out, which it did.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, if Chet would have had probably the care that I had, he probably never would have lost his eye.
Yeah.
What year were you married?
41. December of 41.
You were 20 years old.
Hmm?
You were 20 years old.
I was almost 21. We were married the 22nd of December, and the 1st of February I was 21. And Chet was 27. He'd be 28 in July of that year.
Well, and then Mom was born in 1943.
43, yeah. See, I was down there almost a year.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came home, I was a couple months pregnant with her.
And then who's next, Colleen or Carol?
Pardon?
Who's next, Colleen or Carol?
Colleen. and then Carol,
And then Mark.
and Mark,
And then
and then
Candy.
Cam. It's funny now because most people, so many times people, they think Carol was the youngest.
Why?
I don't know, maybe she looks younger than Cammy. Her hair, she never does a thing to it, but her hair is real dark yet.
Mm-hmm.
Although she keeps telling me she's got a lot of gray in it, but I can't see it with my eyes.
Well, how far apart are they all? Real close, or?
Yeah. See, Colette was about, well, she would have been 4 in September, but Colleen was born the 1st of May, before Colette would have been 4. So they're
They're 3 years apart.
better than 3.5 years apart.
Yeah.
And then between Colleen and Cammy, I had 4 of them that were under school age, or under 5 at one time. I had 4.
That must have been fun.
Well, you know, that's the funniest thing. People think that, and I can remember, like, when 4 of them had the chicken pox. Colette always brought everything home from school because she was
she was
in
older.
school. Yeah, so she'd bring, and she'd never get any. I mean, like when she had chicken pox, it was a few here and there, but then the other kids got them really. But you know, I used to. Well, I can remember neighbors feeling so sorry for having those kids all sick. You know, it was a great time.
All they did was lay around.
Everybody was around, and you know, I mean, well, Carol was quite sick, and Mark was broken up terribly, but they weren't. I mean, we did things, you know. It was a great time, and here I can remember we had 2 doors down. We had neighbors that they always were like Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus to my kids, and they brought over teddy bears and building blocks, gave them to the kids.
Aww.
Well, they owned the hardware store downtown, so I think they had access to everything.
Yeah.
But they did. They treated my kids like that. In fact, they took them, 2 of them one year when we went on a little vacation. Loved it.
Yeah, I bet the kids loved it.
Oh, and they made such a fuss over them. They were always so good. We've been so lucky. And we had an old man and lady that lived next door. It was very nice old people. And he used to have a hammock out in the yard. And I can remember when Mark was a real little guy, he'd come over maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon and ask if he could take Mark out, sit with Mark out in the hammock, and he'd take Mark and put him on his tummy probably, and they'd sit there, and he always had lifesavers in his pocket for him.
Mm-hmm.
But they were good, real good to my kids too.
Well, and your parents still live right in town too?
Yes, they always did after we once moved to town.
Yeah.
They lived just right across from the Catholic Church, on this corner closest.
Okay, that's the house I was
They lived
thinking of.
upstairs there.
Okay.
Then they moved in the later years, they moved across from the hotel upstairs.
Was that a trailer home or something?
Then Mother had a trailer home
Okay.
after that house was sold that they had lived in, and then I think Aunt Bobby bought that trailer house, and Mother lived in it, and she loved it. Well, it was, you know, it was modern and it was convenient. She was always used to really housekeeping in a big house. Even when they lived upstairs in those houses, it was full house, you might say.
I remember baking cookies with her.
Do you really?
Yeah. She used to bake cookies all the time.
Do you know, Cassie, I have a picture, I can't tell you where it is, but it's in an album somewhere, or else it's in my box of photos, of you and Callie, Easter. Oh, let's see, was it Easter? I think it was Easter Sunday, out on the steps out here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was either Easter or Mother's Day, but you have a big bowl off from a package
Mm-hmm.
up on top of your head. And I can remember my mother had, I think it was a wool something wrapped on her knee because she had an ache in her knee, and she died within a month. There was no sign of, I mean, she wasn't sick or anything. In fact, the day before she died, she had been out playing cards, and a neighbor lady, or a lady friend of hers told me, some months after Mother died, that she had called Mother that evening after they played cards just to visit.
Mhm.
And Mother finally said, well, she said, I gotta hang up now because the twins are coming on. Well, she always watched all the ball games.
Yeah.
My family always did, my mother and dad, from way, way, way back.
That would explain why my mom liked the Vikings so much.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, my folks were always interested in them. So she had to watch the twins. Well, it was the next morning, I think about 5 o'clock, that she woke up with this severe pain in her chest. And she called Leola, they were in the hotel right next door to her.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I think I had gone to work, and I went to work at 8 o'clock. And when I came into work, it was a bitter, bitter cold day, probably 30 below. And I remember Dr. Olson I said to him, I'm sorry that I'm almost late, because there was always things to do before the patients arrived. I said, I'm sorry that I'm so late, but I said, I just ran over and picked up the mail and took it over to my folks so that my dad wouldn't have to get out this morning. And he asked, well, how are they? And I said, well, this June they'll celebrate, and I can't remember what it was, if it was their 50-something wedding anniversary. I said, in June they'll celebrate whatever this is. Well, it wasn't. Only within an hour, I got a call from Leola that Mother was in this shape, and they had called the ambulance to get her to the hospital. And she was dead the next morning. I was out there with her during the noon hour. I remember holding her hand, and then they had told us not to talk to her. And but she did raise up when the 12 o'clock whistle blew at noon, and she said, oh, it's 12 o'clock. She couldn't believe it. It was 12 o'clock. That's about the only conversation.
How old was she?
How old?
Yeah.
If she would have lived one more month to the day, she would have been 85.
Huh.
Yeah. But she really only lived probably, my dad died the year you were born.
The week I was born.
Yeah.
My first trip out.
Was that in 65?
66.
66.
January.
Yeah, and Mother died in 70. So
Yeah.
she wasn't alone too many years. When I think how long I've been alone,
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
Well, and I must have been really young because I was never there with Callie.
You must have been really young.
Well, I mean, I was 4, but I mean, I remember
you
baking
mean-
cookies with her,
Oh.
but Callie was never there.
Where
so.
were you, up at her house?
Yeah,
Oh.
behind the hotel.
Oh, yeah, by then she
Some
was
of us spent the afternoon up there or something
Oh,
with her, baking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I so often think, how my mother and dad would have enjoyed all these grandchildren, you guys, and then all the great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
Oh, my folks would have really enjoyed that.
Mom really liked him.
Grandpa?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Grandpa was a great,
Yeah.
very, a quiet man, but when I think he worked like a slave. He was head janitor at the school here at the time. Back then, it was just the great big
Yeah.
grade and high school together. And if it stormed and snowed, he'd be down to the school hand shoveling. They didn't have anything else.
Right.
The sidewalks, so that everybody could get into school. And sometimes he stayed almost all night to feed the boiler, to keep the heat on. He'd come home at 7 o'clock to have breakfast, and he'd probably shovel half of ours before he'd go back to school. And he lived till he was 78.
Yeah.
Never was in the hospital in his life. He just dropped dead.
Exhausted?
No, it was like I say, it was that bitter cold morning,
Yeah.
and he apparently used to take the battery. His car was parked outdoors, no garage where they lived,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in the habit of taking the battery out of the car and bringing it upstairs to the apartment to keep it warm. And I think he had taken it down. He was going to put it in the car and start the car for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And Mother looked out, and he was laying on the ground,
Oh.
and that was the end.
Huh.
Yeah. But like I said, I can remember them staying here I used to call it our winter vacation. We always went to the state basketball tournament and stayed downtown in the hotel, and that was a big treat. And Mother and Dad would come over and stay with the kids here.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, I can still remember, trying to thank them. And my mother would say, "It's a privilege. They love to take care of the kids."
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. And until my mother and dad died, I always had, this is stupid, I always had the feeling if I got mad at Chad or I was going to leave him or anything, I could always go home
Yeah.
to my phone. And I know I could have.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's how parents are.
Uh-huh.
Think about it. Wouldn't you have taken any of your kids in
Yeah.
here if they'd have had trouble?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Mark lived here for a while, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
See? It's the way parents are. If you get along with them, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, some kids would rather never come home.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be terrible if your kids left you?
It'd be pretty awful.
Huh?
Yeah, well, Mom.
Well, yeah, but she was a grown married woman and been gone for so long.
How long have you had lived in this home?
We had it built in 1950. We've lived here ever since.
You didn't build it yourself?
No.
Grandpa wasn't out here working during the
Are
summer?
you kidding? Grandpa wouldn't, he hardly knew which end of the hammer to hammer with. He was not a mechanic. I can remember Uncle Glenn coming over and they'd been going up and down stairs and he was opening the basement door and the handle on it was so loose. He finally asked me where the screwdriver was and he tightened it. And Chet opened that door probably 4 times at least every day to hang his jacket up. No, he was no mechanic. If anything even sounded a little wrong with the car, he never raised the hood. It was take it to the garage and have somebody that knew what they were doing. But he knew all the ins and outs of baseball and football. And he used to referee high school basketball games around the area schools. He and the fellow who was the present superintendent here at the time refereed together a lot. And then up until the last years, he was on the chain for the high school football.
Mm-hmm.
And he with his one eye, he umpired high school baseball. In fact, some of the guys that knew it that were teasing, they'd holler out and call him a one-eye dump, and they'd boo him.
What?
He helped build the athletic field, the original athletic field out here. He and some of the other fellows who were on the baseball team, they played for the Eastern Minnesota League. And they actually made the first ball field we had, and we had lighting. He wasn't a player, but one of the fellows who was always interested was an electrician, and he was pretty much in charge of the lighting, or arranged it.
Down at the corner here?
Uh-huh. Well, remember where the tennis courts were down there?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whatever happened to them. They're not. Carol just told me the other day they're not there anymore.
No, but there's like a field still.
Huh?
There's still a field down there because we drove by there the other day because I remember playing. Mark
Yeah,
and
there's-
everybody playing down there.
Yeah, there's a field and it's fenced in, isn't it?
Maybe. I don't remember.
Well, it used to be.
Okay.
It's called Saloka Field.
Okay.
It was named after one of these buddies of Chet that built the field.
Yeah.
He used to be our milkman.
Hmm.
Back in those days, when my kids were small, you bought a sheet of tickets from the milkman, and I kept them on the windowsill, and we never locked our doors. And Andy would deliver milk, and I could be in the bathroom. He came in, opened the refrigerator, looked at it, he knew how much milk I needed, so he left the milk, pulled the tickets off from the windowsill. I mean, that went on for years here. I never knew how much milk I needed, but Andy always knew.
How often would he come by?
Every day. Oh, he was an ambitious fellow. He was one of those kind of people who had the ability, he could work all day running off from the milk truck carrying milk and back to it, and he had the dairy,
Mm-hmm.
and then play ball at night. He had just terrible lot of energy, and he didn't live real long. He died shortly after Chet. He was younger than Chet.
And did he deliver butter too?
No,
Just milk.
just milk and cream.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's all I ever knew of.
Mm-hmm. So he didn't carry a whole bunch of stuff from the dairy, sour cream, and I suppose you
No,
made
you know,
sour cream then,
Back then
didn't
we
you?
never, no, when you had sour cream, you soured
Soured it
a
yourself.
pint of cream that was
Yeah.
really delicious when you made cookies with it. I have such a good recipe for sour cream cookies with a browned butter frosting.
Ooh.
Oh, they were good. And when you buy commercial sour cream now, it's not like the real sour cream.
Mm-mm. You can sour it with lemon juice.
I'm sure you could.
Buttermilk and lemon juice, whatever we made sour for
Well,
bread.
couldn't you even with vinegar, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
I would
Maybe
think.
it was, I don't know. Yeah.
I would think so. But you know, when you let regular cream,
Mm-hmm.
real cream, not half and half, but real
Right.
cream, when you let that sour, it kind of coagulates. You know, it would get thicker.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, like the commercial sour cream. Only I think that's done entirely different process.